You are not to be influenced by any outside consideration whatever. In that connection, permit me to say that the defendant is not being tried for practicing professional engineering without a license. The other witnesses in the case are not being tried for constructing this building without obtaining the proper permits. Those are matters which do not concern you, except those things were permitted to be brought out on cross-examination of the witnesses in order to enable you to evaluate accurately the weight which you will give the testimony of those witnesses. Keep your minds concentrated on the point in question, and not on these other things, even though they may be a violation of the law, or may not be. It does not make any difference whether they are or not, except, as I say, they were brought out for the purpose of giving you a complete picture of the transaction, that you may better be able to arrive at your verdict. The real question is whether or not this defendant did design the steel understructure for this coal pocket in such a culpably negligent manner that the collapse resulted from that cause, which collapse resulted in the death of this man. Now, there are certain facts which have not been disputed. They are briefly that this coal pocket was constructed on the site in question on concrete foundations running crosswise, that is, towards the river, crosswise of the pocket, the columns resting on those concrete foundations. The grand jury has indicted the defendant for the crime of criminally carrying a pistol after conviction of a crime. There are 2 counts in the indictment. The first count alleges in substance that on the 29th day of January, the defendant, then being a person over the age of 16 years, feloniously did have and carry concealed upon his person a certain pistol and a certain revolver without a written license, as prescribed by Section 137 of the Penal Law, licensing such possession and concealment, and in so doing, the indictment charges that he committed the crime of criminally having and concealing a firearm concealed upon his person after having been convicted of a crime. The first count of the indictment goes on to allege that prior to the 29th day of January, the defendant in due form of law was convicted of a crime, to wit, breaking and entering upon a certain indictment then and there pending, and on the 13th day of December was duly sentenced following conviction. That allegation of the indictment is admitted by the defendant. The second count of the indictment alleges in substance that on the 29th day of January, the defendant committed the crime of criminally having and possessing a firearm after having been convicted of a crime, and said count of the indictment goes on to allege that he was then and there over the age of 16 years, and that he feloniously did have in his possession a certain pistol and revolver of a size which might be concealed upon the person without having a license permitting him to have possession of such an article. And the second count of the indictment reiterates the allegations as the prior conviction, which prior conviction has been admitted and which you may, for the purpose of this trial, consider as having been proved, just the same as if witnesses were brought here to testify to the prior conviction. Ladies and gentlemen, before we come to a discussion of the provisions of the statute under which this defendant has been indicted, there are certain general principles pertaining to the trial of every case and to this trial, which the court will explain to you.